Welcome to So You Want to Start a Business podcast. Welcome, and I am your host, Ingrid Thompson. When I first started this podcast, I wasn't even really sure where it would go and who it would reach. Now, thousands of people from hundreds of countries around the world listen on a regular basis and download the episodes. It has always been about learning from and listening to the business owners talking about their business startup experiences and having the lessons learned. And here we are years later, and we are still learning. In today's episode, we meet Cassie Briggs, who tells us that she has listened to pretty much every episode of this podcast using the information and inspiration to build her highly successful Success in Science career coaching business. In each episode, you will find something you can use in your own business enterprise, wherever you are on that business journey. Every guest has their unique story, and I believe you will really benefit from Cassie's business story today. I'm Ingrid Thompson. I'm a financial educator, and I have been running my own business, Healthy Numbers, for about 20 years. And over that time, I have worked with literally hundreds of people to help them build and grow their own business, successful and thriving businesses. I'm the author of the book, So You Want to Start a Business, which is Business 101 for getting started in businesses, and available wherever you can buy your books. Anyway, it's now time to listen to Cassie Briggs. Settle in for a terrific conversation. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, and here we are today with Cassie Briggs, and this is going to be a fabulous conversation. I just know it. So, Cassie, hello and welcome.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Calling all the way from Michigan in the United States.
I know, and it's today and tomorrow and yesterday and all of those things, as we say.
Yeah.
Okay, Cassie, let's jump right in. What is your business? What business are you in?
So I am in career coaching, and I provide support for students and early career professionals in science and medicine. So that ranges from private coaching for students or those early professionals. And I also support universities that support those students. So that would be consulting to help them with their career development reform.
It's such an interesting niche, as you would say, in some ways, and we're going to explore that a little bit more. So, when did you start this business?
You know, it's funny you asked me that because I had this 5-year rollout plan that when my kids entered kindergarten and school age, that I would then launch. That turned into 3 months. So I actually launched in 2020.
Yep, 2020. So you've been going for a few years, and why did you want to have your own business?
So I think sometimes we hear the story of when you start your family, your kids' dreams become your dreams. I had a very different experience. I think my kids enabled a dream I didn't even know I had. So I was a weirdo that in 9th grade in high school, I knew I wanted to be a college biology professor and tunnel vision all the way through. I didn't consider anything else. And then when we were ready to start our family, I realized that my 1 hour and 20-minute commute one way wasn't conducive to starting the family. And so we elected to move closer to my husband's job. And kudos to all those parents that are stay-at-home parents. I do not have the stamina for that. And so I really was looking for some intellectual stimulation. And if the listeners could see me, I'm in the middle of the country, surrounded by corn and cows. So there are no universities near me. So the reason I started the business was simply out of that necessity to have some intellectual stimulation.
Yeah, it's pretty limited with corn and cows. I mean, they have their role, but yes,
Absolutely.
And that's a brave move. So it sounds like what you wanted from the business from the beginning was your own intellectual stimulation.
Yeah, it was. And I think that's why I started a business. But the reason I started this business was because I really wanted to stay connected to students. And I really wanted to stay connected to science. My identity was so wrapped up into being a scientist and being a professor. I was able to let go of the professorhood, but I was having a lot of trouble with the science piece of me. And so doing this line of work allows me to have both still, and
Mm.
really continue supporting students that I care so much about while staying up to date on the current science.
Yeah, it's such a, and I love that distinction between starting a business and starting this business. So, one of my favorite questions, of course, is this question about when was the business real? And so, Cassie, for you, when did it say, okay, this is a real business?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this because I actually think there are three distinctive moments where it
Mhm.
felt like business. Okay, now it's really a business. Okay, now it's really, really a business. And so that first moment was before I was even official. I had a prospective client come to me like begging for my support and offering dollars behind it. And so, I threw out a number about how much it would cost, grossly underestimated the value of it, because we held our session, which was a mock interview, and she doubled how much she paid me. So right there, I knew there was something. And then I think another moment comes with when I did become legally official in the US and did all the registration and got a bank account for the business itself. And then the most recent one, which feels like the biggest, is I landed a 5-figure university client. So I think those are my three moments.
Congratulations. Wow, that's huge, isn't it? Wow, that's fabulous.
Thank you.
Cassie, and I know you told me that story about the client who paid you double on the first one. It's just such a beautiful example of how we really can undervalue ourselves when we're trying to find that spot. And we actually, let's go to pricing now. I know the questions are now a little bit out of order, but so do you want to talk to us about your thinking about how you, like you said, you plucked that number out of the air, but I know you've done work since, and a 5-figure deal with a university is, like that. Okay, talk to us about your numbers and your pricing and how you've come to where you are now.
To be fully transparent, I am terrible at this and continuing to grow in it. But I'm very fortunate. Here in the US, we have access to free business mentorship through the Small Business Association in our SCORE chapter. And so I had business mentors from the very beginning that kind of helped me navigate this. Now, I put my heels in the mud hard about, no, I'm not raising my prices, then I'm not serving the people who really need me. And so I fought it for a while. And then meeting with peer coaches, and they kind of shared their pricing, and I talked about mine, and I was probably a third of what they were charging. So I was grossly underestimating how much people are willing to pay for this. But mind you, I think no matter what, my pricing is going to be a little bit lower than the average. And it's not because there's less value there. It's just because of the clientele I chose to target. So students and early career professionals just aren't made of money yet. So as long as that's true, I think that's where I'll feel comfortable. But with that said, an additional thing that I did is I really started valuing my time. So I was calculating how many hours I was really putting in to each of my coaching services. And from there, I adjusted the pricing accordingly. Because I thought about it as well as, I'm taking time away from my kids and my family to do this. That's worth something. That PhD I worked so hard to get is worth something. All the certification courses I completed are worth something. So I started valuing my own credentials as well. And so those pieces together helped with that. Now, in regards to the university gig, negotiation is a tough thing for me, and I've worked on that for a long time, and I coach people through negotiations all the time. But when it comes to myself, it's much trickier. And so what's beautiful about my work with universities is that they often get these big grants to support some initiatives at the university. So in that sense, they have a budget and I have to spend every dime of it. So there's no need to negotiate. It's more of, this is what you can get for that budget. And so it's a great place to be for both parties.
Yeah. And it's such, I love, can I just rewind a bit back there? I love what you said there about knowing what they've got to spend and then helping them see the value that they're going to get from that money. But to go back to your credentials, you know, all those parts of what makes you you and the contribution you make, you're not bringing, like you are bringing a series of credentials to the coaching that no one else has. Like that's unique to you in this field, and it does take someone else to help you see that, doesn't it?
Sure does.
It sure does. So let's go to the customers, the students, the where you first started. Um, I guess that person that was begging you to please give them the experience that they needed was a good indication. But overall, as you were sort of putting this business together, knowing that you wanted a business, where did you have that idea that these customers needed you, the students were looking for what you're offering? And then how has that changed over time?
And I think that's where all those years of experience helped me. So I've been in the classroom working with students for over a decade, and I was hearing the same things over and over again. Like, I love science, but what can I do with it? And how do I know I'm headed in the right career direction? And med school is really competitive. How am I ever going to get in? So you hear some of the same trends again and again. And then, of course, my own experience plays into it, I think. So most students have access to some free career services, right, at their universities. But this is where I think finding a discipline-specific coach or consultant is helpful, because I was told that grad school would require me taking out a loan, and that killed my dream right there because I couldn't afford that. And it turns out that in most STEM disciplines, not only is your tuition covered, but you get a stipend on top of that. So dream alive again, right? So that's just one example of how some industry expertise really makes a difference. So I think those are the reasons that it was clear to me that this service was needed.
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting that, and so is a lot of the places for STEM, are they actually done through scholarship and sponsorship? Is that a really viable pathway for people to take?
Yeah, so at least in the US, and I know some schools in Australia actually do this too, they offer students, the stipend comes from them teaching for the university and or completing an extra research assignment. But in addition to that, a lot of science PIs or professors, they get grants to support their research projects, and that often includes a stipend for a grad student. And so there's a lot of fruitful ways to get additional education without paying out of pocket.
Without paying out of pocket. And you actually have a connection to Australia, don't you? That I think we
I do.
uncovered when we were having a conversation previously, getting ready for this.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing that, or
Not at all? So first exposure was my honeymoon. So I went up to Cairns and we spent some time exploring the Great Barrier Reef, and it was an incredible trip. And then that actually opened up an opportunity. I was working for a university at the time, and they have a study abroad program that takes students from Michigan to Australia. And because I knew the lay of the land, if you will, and I was a biologist, I was an easy pick as the professor to lead that. So that trip was fully paid for, and I was paid to teach the course. So definitely a win-win there.
definitely a win-win? But you know, one of the things that I thought was interesting when we were talking about that is that you are specifically to coaching students in the US. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and about why that? Not only are you niched, I'm going to say niche because that's uncomfortable. Not only do you have a niche that is around STEM and through, your particular expertise, but you're also staying within the US boundary as well.
Yeah, so it really depends on what the client is looking for. So if they're just looking for career exploration, so what can I do with my interests, my values, and my skill set? That's pretty much globally applicable. So I could really work with any client looking for that. But when it comes to application support and navigating the job market, I think it's really important to have someone that understands the job market. And so I understand how the US job market works. I would have to do a ton of research to figure out other parts of the world. So you'd be better served by a local coach or consultant.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Okay. So just how do you get new customers today? Like how has that expanded from where you were to the new customers that you attract today?
I feel so bad for your listeners because I'm going to tell you, I have not a clue. So clients seem to always find me. I'm not out seeking them at this point. I have an intake form on my free inquiry session, and 9 times out of 10, they tell me they find me through an organic Google search. I have never paid for advertising, so it's just they find me organically. And then the very small percentage left finds me through referrals or LinkedIn. So I guess the one piece of advice I would give is that make sure you have a Google business profile. It's active, updated, and your clients are leaving reviews. I have to say, I feel like every time a review is left on my profile, I get a massive influx of inquiries right after that. So I don't know if those are just correlation or causation, but definitely encourage those reviews.
It's so good that you've mentioned that, because Google My Business and Google Business is and it's free. It's completely free. And, I love what you just said there. Every time there's a Google review, there's an influx of inquiries. So whether they're actually, whether one causes the other, but there has to be a relationship there, doesn't there? And I think a lot of businesses forget about Google My Business. In fact, you just reminded me to do something about mine. So thank you.
Fantastic.
Now, you said you got some coaching from your community coaching, your business community coaching. Did they take you through financial viability? I mean, I'm imagining that working from home, you've got minimal costs in terms of, what it costs you to run your business. You still have all those basic costs, the compliance ones you mentioned, insurances, things like that. How did you know, and how do you continue to know that you are continuing to be viable? And what does financial viability mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think the answer varies from person to person. And a service-based business often has some perks, especially an online business, because the overhead is pretty low, at least initially. So I think when I launched, I was probably spending $2,000 a year on things like a Zoom account, a website, a domain, a scheduler, that kind of stuff. I was really fortunate to have a little nest egg to start with. So my grandma actually gave me my inheritance early because she wanted to live to see the fruits of that. And so I was very blessed to have that start. And with that said, I was so scared to cut ties with my daytime job. And also know for the beginning of this business, I really didn't need to make any money. We were doing okay financially. I mean, we weren't eating steaks every night, but we weren't eating ramen noodles either. So I think for me, it was a matter of letting go of my identity more than anything concerning viability of the business. And so I actually hired a coach of my own to help me make that career transition from being a full-time professor to being a full-time entrepreneur. And so I actually tried to resign from my job a year before I actually did. And it was one of those things where they threw everything but the kitchen sink at me, just making me feel so valued there. And I really did love my job. It's just the commute wasn't great. But as you know, the timing of when that business started, 2020, was COVID. And so we were online anyway, so I didn't have to commute. And so I was like, all right, we'll try the online teaching for a bit. It's not the same. It's just not as rewarding for me. And so I ended up going part-time in my professor position for a year before I finally said, I think this business has got some legs under it. And then I took off from there. So I had a lot of security to test out the business before I completely let go of the day job.
And I think, Cassie, that's a very common scenario. I know certainly people that I've interviewed for this podcast, certainly clients that I've worked with. And I always say to people, like, just see how you go. Can you do it one day a week? And, is there ways of doing that? But just to get the feel of, is it going to be something for you? And, as you said, it was something that you absolutely, it was your business to do. So, yeah. And nice of grandma, did she know that you were going to use the money for a business, or was she just giving it? Yeah.
Yep, she did. She knew from the very beginning. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that, to have that is quite wonderful, isn't it? And to know that you've got that little nest egg to get that going with. But, even just you saying that about insurances and websites, that can all start to add up, even though, it can feel like it's not a lot to start with, but it can start to balloon out a little bit, even for a service provider working from home.
Absolutely.
Okay. Exit strategy, is it too early to ask that? Where do you sort of see this going?
Normally, I would say that is too early to ask, but I've been listening to your podcast long enough that I have thought about this. So the long-term dream for this business is, so I'm a conservation biologist, but I service anyone in science or medicine. So the grand dream is to actually hire a coach in each of the disciplines. So a chemist, a physicist or engineer, and somebody in the medical field. And so my exit strategy would be to sell the business to one or all of them.
Lovely. And nice that I've prompted that question for you.
Yes.
Now, one of my other favorite questions is the magic wand question. And of course, being a scientist, there's no way in the world you believe in magic wands. But if you could go back to the beginning, is there anything that you might have done differently?
A lot of guests say the mistakes that you've made along the way were learning experiences. And that was my initial thought. But I have to be honest, I wish I would have shopped around a bit more for the certification programs within the coaching industry. Okay. I have done several at this point, and they're not all created equal. And so I think I gained a lot of confidence by going through some high quality certification programs, which also helped me with the profit mindset and raising my prices.
Yeah, that's, I don't think anyone said anything quite like that, because it's about bringing those skills that you need to be a coach. That's very, very astute there. And if somebody could have told you there's something that you could have known from the start, I know that's a slightly different question.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I underestimated how hard it is to be a parent of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at the launch of your business, and especially with the growth that it's had in such a short time. We're talking several figure difference month to month between the years. And so it's been a lot to balance all that, and really tricky to find reliable and affordable childcare. And so I really wish I would have known and not have been so ignorant or optimistic about how easy that would be to balance, because I know there's listeners out there that are in the same boat, that they're hoping to parent at the same time as their business. And in some businesses that certainly is possible. When I'm trying to coach a client in a session and I have a screaming child, that's just not fair to me, the client, or the kiddo. And so it took a while, but I finally found an equilibrium where I work on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturdays. And my kids are in childcare those days. So I'm full on businesswoman. And then on Sunday, Tuesday, Thursdays, I'm full on mama. And I have found that's a really healthy thing for me. Trying to do both in the same day was pretty tough.
Yeah. I can only imagine that there is no balance. It's not a thing, is it?
Nope.
It's not. But thank you for being so honest about that in this conversation. So, I mean, and you've alluded a little bit to that here, but is it tough being in business? I mean, you've talked about the combining that sort of getting that combination right. Has it been tough for you? And I mean, you've alluded to a couple of things through the conversation, but what makes it tough and how do you get through?
I think the hardest part is I have a very compassionate heart. And so I have a very hard time saying no or referring clients away. And that wasn't a problem when I didn't have a lot coming in because I could accommodate everyone. Now I can't. I just don't have the capacity. And frankly, I'm not the best fit for every client. And so just being able to have that conversation and be compassionately direct about it, I think has been an area I've grown in quite a bit since I started.
That ability to say no.
Yep.
So who helped you with that, or did it just come through doing it more often? Or
That's where those business mentors actually helped me a little bit. They role played with me and it was awkward and uncomfortable, but really helpful because right after that, I got a client inquiry that I just knew wasn't the right fit. I mean, they weren't even in STEM. And so that should have been an easy turn away, but it still was hard.
Yeah, because you wanted to say yes. So we can't do it ourselves. As you've said, you've used mentors, coaches. Who else has helped you? And, have you hired anyone? Who did you hire? What order? Talk to us about that side of the business.
So the very first thing I did was I think I had 10 informational interviews with other coaches at the early stages, even before I launched. And so that was really helpful. And that helped think through the processes that I'd want in place when I launched. And then my business mentors, as I mentioned before, were instrumental. Everything from an SEO report on my website free of charge that we could kind of talk through. Yeah. And all the way to some of the things we talked about, like help coaching me through how to say no to a client that's not the right fit. And then
getting your pricing right.
Yeah, exactly. And then I hired I think like at least 6 different coaches of my own over the last several years, some for reasons to help me make a transition, other times just to see how they did it, to see the breadth in the field. Then I hired a financial advisor / tax consultant, which has been hugely helpful. And I don't know how Australia categorizes their businesses, but for me, I was an LLC and filed my taxes essentially just as a joint couple. And it was all embedded within that. But then I got that big university gig that changed my income dramatically. And that would have been a huge hit tax-wise. And so I got recategorized so I wouldn't get as much taxes taken out. I would never have known to do that if I didn't have the tax advisor. And then I have my own podcast as well. And I launched that really to support my current clients, not really as advertising. And the editing just took forever. So I ended up hiring a podcast editor to help me with that. And then, of course, my husband is a huge supporter of this. I wouldn't be able to do it. I work nights on Mondays and Wednesdays and Saturdays. So he's with the kids soloing it. And so I couldn't do it without him. And of course, my extended family has been just cheering me on the whole way through. So that's been really exciting.
Yeah. And just on that, it is actually quite late at night for you because this time slot worked best for it to happen. So this is a nighttime thing and, your family take care of things. Yeah. And it's good that they do that. The podcast editing can certainly take its toll. It's interesting that the podcast, you actually see that as being a part of your service offering, don't you?
Yeah. And I think so for me, when we're doing the career exploration, the best way to learn about a career is to hear directly from someone in it. And so informational interviews can be really intimidating, especially for my high school and college students. And so hearing me essentially doing an informational interview allows them to not only learn about the profession, but get an idea of how those work so that they can start doing their own. And so it was really for them. But of course, it's public. And so anyone could listen in and learn about careers as well. But that's been a huge value add for my clients because they also get access to the extended interview, which isn't available to the public. And the extended interview asks those nitty gritty personal things like the worst parts of your job and the best parts of your job and the greatest challenges. What would you do differently? That kind of stuff.
Which is not available to the public, which, Cassie, is probably a really great time to do a bit of self-promotion here. And we probably should have done that a bit earlier. Sorry. So what is the name of the podcast? Where do people find you? What's your website? Yeah, go.
Sure. So the podcast is called Diverse Roots, Career Journeys in Science and Medicine. And you can find it anywhere you get your podcasts. If you do have trouble finding it, just go to my website, successinsciencecc.com. And there's a tab that says podcast and it'll take you right to it. So those are the best ways to find my resources. But you can get in touch with me directly. Probably the best place is LinkedIn. In terms of the messaging features are so great on there. You can leave me a voice message or a text message. So that's the best place.
Yeah. Do you dabble in any of the other social media aspects?
Yeah. So, and it's so funny. When I first launched the business, I was an avid social media poster. Like every day I would put some value content on there. And then I got so swamped. I post every time I have a podcast episode, which is a couple times a month, and that's it. And so I actually hired an intern, a science communication and marketing intern this year. And so she starts this week, actually. And so you'll see me be a little bit more active and she'll be helping me with that. So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn for all of those too.
Yeah, perfect. Lovely. So you've talked a bit about coaching and mentoring. I'm not sure, did you have anything you wanted to add there about the role they've played and the importance? I feel like we've covered quite a bit of that.
Yeah, I think one thing that might be helpful to listeners, because I know you're going to ask me for what's the one piece of advice I would share with somebody wanting to launch a business. And it's get a career coach. This is a big moment in your life when you're making a switch and you could be dealing with identity issues like I was. Imposter syndrome could be a factor. Even thinking through some of the logistics, a career coach can be really helpful through all of that. And so I think it would behoove us to differentiate what is coaching, what is consulting, what is mentoring. So just really briefly, a mentor is somebody that leads you down the path that they took. A consultant is someone who provides you information and advice. And a coach does none of those things. So we're actually told, don't give any advice, don't give any guidance or information, but they ask really powerful questions. They get you to be really reflective and thoughtful about your decisions. And so my business is actually a combination of all three. But be mindful as you shop around what you're really looking for.
Yeah, no, that's such a great way of putting it. And I think to your point about saying no to clients, it's also really important for people who are shopping around or looking for the right mentor coach to actually, at some point, if it's not working, is to be able to say this isn't working either. So the relationship is both ways. And I think, certainly when I was studying to be a coach, that was one of my experiences because the coach and I just didn't gel, but it was part of the curriculum that we had to be allocated, and it just didn't work. And and it's hard because like if you've already paid for some sessions or you're already you've invested a lot because you've already started talking and doing things, is that ability to separate that relationship if it's not working.
Yep. And you'll see some variation in the industry. So in service
Oh.
agreements, you can look for termination clauses. I actually have a money back guarantee. Now, just to be clear, I'm not guaranteeing you'll get a job. I'm just guaranteeing that you're going to find value from our work together.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever used it, but it's there to take some of that pressure off.
Same. I do the same. And I also if I'm working with someone and they decide that they don't need to have 3 months, they only want 1 month or whatever. And I have recently separated from a client that just turned up with her breakfast bowl and clearly wasn't taking it seriously. Feedback, Cassie, how do you get feedback? And you said you get reviews, but what does feedback mean to you?
Oh, the number one source of feedback and probably the most important feedback is from the clients themselves.
Yeah.
And I mean the clients that actually go through my programs as well as the ones that don't hire me. So I touch base and I ask a little bit about kind of what was the reasoning for their decision about not hiring me, because that informs you a lot. It tells you maybe it's the price, maybe it's the timing, maybe they found a better fit elsewhere. There's lots of reasons. And so that's really helpful. And keeping track of your numbers is huge too. I was really uncertain whether this was a seasonal type business or if it was pretty steady year round. So I tracked my numbers, how many people inquired about the service, how many people hired, and who was. And so I think, don't quote me on this, but I want to say in terms of having an inquiry session and someone hire you, it's a 50-50 shot. So I spent some time really looking at my numbers. And so I'm sitting somewhere around 75-80%, which feels really good. But if there's ever a dip, it lets me know there's something going on or there's something off. So that feedback from clients is great.
Do you do that yourself? That check back with someone, or do you have that done by an outside company?
Nope, I'm doing that myself right now. There is some value of having an outside company do it because people would be quite a bit more honest. So
yeah, I do have a friend, and that is part of their service suite, is that they offer that to bigger business, like not big businesses, because it's often like for people who've pitched for things and then haven't won the pitch, is to go back to the client and say, well, what was it about that pitch that didn't, or what was it about the other pitch that made, to find that out. So that it can actually be beneficial to have that done. All right.
And I was actually, just real quick, I was really surprised at how honest people might be. So they would tell me, I just can't afford that. And so that's what launched my financial aid program. And so now I have a program that goes from interest-free payment plan all the way to pro bono. And so it's objective criteria based on their socioeconomic status. And it really helps quite a bit with allowing me to serve the people that I really set out to serve.
Yeah, and you did talk about that when you talked about your pricing, making your pricing at a place that the target group that you're looking at can still afford. And you have your Giving November Day.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So Giving Tuesday, which is right after Thanksgiving. Yeah, it's right after Thanksgiving here in the US. And so I have a free giveaway of a 6-session coaching package on a topic of your choice. And you just enter in your name on the form. You'll see a logo banner on my website. And you just go to that, submit your name. I spin a dial on a live Facebook feed, and boom, if it's you, you get some free coaching. And usually I'll give a discount to those that entered in. Just because I know they're seeking the service.
Yeah. So if that's you, go look for that button on the website, and all those links will be in the show notes. Okay, so what would be the one thing that you would recommend to someone starting out in their business?
Well, since I already said
a few things,
since I already said get a career coach,
yes,
I might just say kind of 3 characteristics that I think will contribute to your success as a startup. One is having a narrow niche. Yeah. I thought that I was too narrow, but no way. People are looking and finding exactly what they want. And so I'm actually getting my ideal client, and not having much trouble finding business. And so a narrow niche is great. You can expand from there. And then an online presence, having that Google business profile is huge. And then satisfied clients. I mean, you need to have clients that are just raving about their experience with you, and leaving reviews, whether it's for your products or your services.
Yeah, that's so true. And what's interesting is when you said that part of your exit is to have coaches that do other subjects, is that your niche is already like you can narrow it further and further, can't you? That's the thing about the narrower the niche, you can go further and further. Cassie, what a tremendous conversation, and I appreciate your time and thank you so much. Your approach to what you're doing and your clients. Anything else you'd like to add before we go?
Just that it's been a total pleasure to be on this podcast and to talk with you. And those of you listening, please go back and listen to all the other previous episodes. They are relevant and they are useful. And I did that from the moment I started my business. I've been listening since. So,
Cassie, thank you so much for saying. And a lot of them are service-based. And even if the content of the service being provided isn't the same, it certainly is part of the philosophy, isn't it? So yeah, it's great. Cassie, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
So much in this conversation with Cassie. I'm sure you are taking away ideas for your own business. Some of the key takeaways for me: Cassie makes a distinction between starting a business and starting this business. And it's an important distinction because of how much this means to her. The moment the business felt real, of course, one of my favorite questions. That first moment, okay, this is real. And then a second one, and then a third one, each building on that realness of business. Her pricing methodology, how can you take inspiration from the way Cassie prices her services? She also talked about the role of a coach, and she had more than one coach in building her business and how invaluable they were, especially in ways of helping her understand money and develop the language and the skills to be able to negotiate the outcomes that work for her. And of course, I love her close attention to tracking the numbers and what that tells her about how her business is tracking along. Such a powerful conversation. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with another business owner or a colleague or friends and family. I'm grateful if you leave a review. We know this helps people find our podcasts. For everyone listening, whether this is your first episode or you've been with us for some time, I truly believe that whatever you are dreaming about can become real. These podcasts are designed to inspire, educate, and inform about what it takes to start, create, and grow a business of your own. Make it easy to have all the latest episodes by subscribing. And as we always say, ideas without action, well, they're just that. They're ideas. And that's okay. But what action are you inspired to take today? Till the next time, thanks for listening.